Buenos dias, bon dia, good morning, everybody. This is my favorite time of the day. For the last 8 weeks almost, we have been having these daily webinars, bringing incredible people, monumental insights, learning, so that we can provide our Hispanic leaders with the information that we need so that we can be understanding the situation and be taking the best decisions that we can for our community, and so that we can be able to communicate with our Hispanic community all across the country. What are the things that we should be thinking about and knowing about? We started this as part of the Hispanic Response and Recovery Plan to mitigate the impact of COVID, to put special attention about our small businesses, entrepreneurs, and independent workers that have been disproportionately affected. And what we have seen is a change in the problematic. It's not only the health issue, it's the economic issue, and now it's the social issue that we have to be understanding and dealing with. And for that today, I'm delighted to bring you one of my favorite people in the entire industry. This is Nadine Dietz, the Chief Communication Officer of Adweek. She is the host of the CMO Moves podcast, and she is a real badass, incredible leader that has provided so much space and opened the door for Hispanic voices like ours to be able to be seen, heard, and valued. And for that, Nadine, I will always be so grateful to you because I asked you and you gave me, and you're an incredible, incredible sponsor for me personally and for the community. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm delighted. I'm honored. And you too are one of my favorite people in the world. And I can't say enough about you to everyone I meet. And I'm delighted to do more with you. I think we're going to change the world one day.
Yes. And so, Nadine, first the coronavirus, then the ongoing civil unrest or racial injustice. The importance of diversity and inclusion cannot actually be underestimated. You created the Diversity and Inclusion Council, and you have every one of the big wigs of the industry being part of that. So you talk and you've heard by everyone says, I'm here because Nadine told me to be here. I am doing this because Nadine told me. So what are the best practices that companies are you hearing about companies that are seriously taking diversity and inclusion to increase the support for their employees and consumers? Just give us a little bit of sense of what do you see this since you started the Diversity and Inclusion Council, and how this social injustice has accelerated that? What are the best practices and actions?
Wow. So that is a very big question. And, I think what's interesting is, if I can back up for just a moment, because before we even launched the Diversity and Inclusion Council, we've been talking about this for years, collectively across the industry, lots of leaders involved on how can we really drive systemic change. And, as many leaders agreed, it just all became more talk and no action. And so an action step was, let's actually create a council and drive to action. And as you think about an array of things you can do to really drive systemic change, there are things you can do personally, as an individual, as an inclusive leader. There are things you can promote and champion within your companies. There are relationships that you can forge to have greater impact. And you can actually create programs if you are in a position like we were at Adweek to do things at scale, like the mentor program. We launched a mentor program specifically to help diverse talent who are close to the C-suite get over that hump and get them into those seats. Because if we don't have more diverse leaders in the C-suite, we're never going to get to the change that we need to see happen. So that is one big step we could take to drive towards systemic change. But on the council are lots of groups that have tons and tons of resources, like yourself, the Hispanic Star. We have the Female Quotient. We have AdColor. We have Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officers from McCann, and a number of other folks who this is what they do all day long. And I think they're probably more frustrated than anybody in the world because they've been talking about this for 30, 40, 50 years, and yet still people have a hard time adopting the principles. So what I would say, just at a very high level, and happy to share resources if it's important for somebody to get access to those resources. I say it starts with you. As leaders, it's really important to educate yourself around especially unconscious bias. It is scientifically impossible for any individual to not have unconscious bias. Therefore, the more you know, the more you're aware, the more you're accountable, and you can start to implement best practices into your leadership style. That applies to everything from the way you hire, the way you give feedback, the way you run your team meetings, your team memos. All of that's really important because the number one problem for everyone is an inclusive environment. We can put diverse talent into seats, but if they don't feel like they belong, they're going to leave. So how do we make sure that it's not just inclusive, but move beyond that? And I like what Tara Casson had to say from Petco in our summit. How do we move beyond inclusion to true belonging? And so that's on all of us as leaders. Then secondly, I would say it is up to us to create and forge those relationships. If you're in marketing, become BFFs with your HR department, your CHRO, or whoever's leading that department, because for you to survive as a brand marketer today, you're not just talking a story to the outside world, it has to come from the inside. And a famous culture expert once said, if you can't sell it inside, you can't sell it outside. So for you to even have a brand that consumers want to be part of, you have to really authentically present yourself. Those communications inside the company and outside are important for that authenticity. And then that's what's going to attract diverse talent to come to work for you. So you've got to be living and breathing this every day with intention.
And I love that. We from the World Human Foundation, we love you, and you know that, and we're absolutely not, like quiet about it or discreet about it. And we're all happy that you are going to be able to talk to us because we need more people like you, allies that, like are caring. Like we welcome you in the Hispanic community. For us, you're a Hispanic at heart. Like a Latina, like whenever you want. But I want people to get to know you. I want my Hispanic leadership, all the room where it happens that, like of our community that are really getting together, that are really making an effort to have a shared agenda and to change the history of our community. I want them to know people like you, people that cares and that's an ally and says like, you know what, like I care about you and I'll give you the platform. So before even going any further about companies, tell us a little bit about you and your background and what, like what made you to be doing what you're doing, and a little bit more again about who is Nadine Dietz.
Oh my goodness gracious. Now you're turning the tables on me. I'm a podcast host for reasons. I get to sit on the other side. So, oh my gosh. So quick story, I spent almost 20 years as a customer centricity consultant. I spent a lot of time building loyalty programs, personalization engines, really understanding consumer behavior, emotional behavior, everything from ethnography to quantitative and qualitative. And so at the sort of the end of that first career of mine, I started penning best practice work for CMOs. And I partnered with a number of CMOs to create a CMO solution guide for omnichannel personalization, which sounds so disparate from where I am now. But honestly, as I continued down that path and started doing more and more thought leadership work in conjunction with CMOs, there became a frame. And you can't just do one thing without the rest of let's say the car working, right? There are lots of parts of a car and it needs all of it to work. So I started really diving in on very specific variables, whether it was how they lead their teams, how they establish credibility with the C-suite, how they think about new tech, how they think about the consumer. And that's just been the work I've been doing. And the number one key to success for any brand marketer in the world has always been their teams. And when that moment really struck me that was the number one variable for everyone, that's when I went way deep inside of teams. How do we help equip leaders in their teams to be more successful? And that's what got me to where I'm at today.
That's amazing. That is amazing. And you know what, at the end of the day, I think that what we have with our community is a very hardworking high ethic values, aspirational. People want to do more, want to give more. And I think that we are seeing an opportunity right now for change. Really, I mean, like you and I have been in the weeds for a long time, and I really think that this is going to be an incredible opportunity to really generate systemic change in a way that it is constructive. We were talking about how sustainability was the train that you needed to start understanding 20 years ago. 10 years ago, it was like, okay, you really need to know how to drive the change. And if you were not on it, then the train departed. And how inclusion will be that, and how, like creating those environments where people want to stay and want to belong are essential. And for Hispanics, I think that there are two things. One is a lack of role models. We don't see ourselves, we don't have like the person that you want to aspire to be, because you don't have that. We're not, we're not visible in front of camera, behind the camera. And I think that that is something that you're doing. And the other one is like within organizations, Hispanics work hard but don't speak up. And so you need 3 Hispanics within an organization to be able to speak up. So if you're a manager, if you're a CMO, and you have Hispanics on your team, and you don't know that, you're never gonna call on them, say like, okay, now you speak, you say something. And that's probably something that with the power and the platform that you have, you're helping both creating mentorship programs and providing opportunities for CMOs to be enlightened about what they can be doing.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. I think you're absolutely right. One of the big observations I had when I did the round 1 of the mentor program is we put out an open form and said, we have 110 of the world's top CMOs. This was in round 1. We now have 250 of them who volunteer to be your mentor. Submit your pitch. And I noticed early on there were very, very few Latinas or Hispanic women who actually submitted a pitch. And I thought to myself, why is that? So I made a whole bunch of phone calls. I called everybody I knew and I said, can you help me figure this out? And the messages that I got back were, that particular part of the population is not used to receiving help. So they don't know how to ask for help, and they don't know what to ask for help. And, I had one of my episodes recently on CMO Moves was with Monica Gill, who's a CMO of Telemundo. And she was talking about the mentor program they had there. And it's not enough to just provide help. You have to actually chase people to help them and really tell them, you should be asking for this. Don't hold back. Don't let anything get in your way. And that's just not a position many are not used to. So how do we rethink this? Because just offering help is not going to get the help to them that they need. I think it comes down to a number of things. One, keep trying. Do everything we can to make sure that people know they have help, how to access it, what to ask for, coach them on what to ask for. 2, provide opportunity. And 3 is, as you said, in rooms, if you're the leader in a room, be intentional of pulling people forward. Don't just talk about folks, really champion and advocate for them across the organization. Give them a platform if you have the power so they can be seen and heard. We just need to all pitch in. One of my favorite quotes is actually from Linda Boff. She's one of my early mentors. And she said to me, Nadine, I have to be mindful as a leader that my voice carries a lot of importance in a room. So it's really important I don't say much and I listen more. And I thought that was really telling.
Yeah. So tell me, you hosted this incredible incredible event a couple of weeks ago, the DNI Summit, and the format was incredible. For those of you listening, it was like one leader introducing another, and introducing and interviewing another, and then another, and you had like 2.5 hours of pure gold, of brilliance, having, I don't know, like a dozen of speakers. Thank you so much for having me there. What are the recurrent things that you heard there that we could apply, because what you're here is the other way around. What we need is like to understand as Hispanic leaders, how do we talk to brands, how do we approach them to care for the Hispanic community, how do we collect that intelligence so that we can go to a brand like Aunt Jemima in, you know, like in our terms, and see like what are the Latino stereotypes that we want people to address and change. How can we actually, as Latino leaders, be collective, producing collective intelligence and action so that we can address the group of people that you represent, and be on your platform, using your like the platforms, that the sort of platforms that you have, so that we can make our like our voice heard.
Yeah, wow. That's a really good question. And I would the first place I would point back to is you. What you're doing with the Hispanic Star is amazing. I'm fully supportive of that, and I think it's so important to have all the voices heard so that there can be awareness. I think the other thing is to really, and and I say this because it's unfortunate, but it's true. You can say the same thing over and over and over again, but if people aren't listening and they're not connecting, no change will happen. So one of the things that we did, right after the DNI Summit, we talked about doubling down with Mark Pritchard opening in that summit. And it actually was 2 days after the George Floyd killing, which led to a whole new set of discussions that wasn't even planned for on that day. But I'm glad we were there that day to have those discussions. It led to the next week, which we all of a sudden decided we have to put up a state of revolt, which was bringing 14 Black leaders together to really share how they're feeling, how they're coping, and then how are they able to lead through this time with their teams, and what actions everyone could take. And that ability and their bravery to just come and bare their hearts and souls allowed all of us to connect in new ways where we could actually truly empathize. So you got to be able to get folks to a place where they can hear, empathize, and really connect. And this is part of this unconscious bias we got to break down, right? And then move towards actions. But the first step is listening, connecting, having people feel and own it for themselves so they can take action, and then giving them a path. What can they do to help?
That's fantastic, and we're looking forward actually to exploring opportunities like that for the Hispanic community, which right now, so what we're exploring, Nadine, is to be on the respectful side, on the quiet side, on the listening side. We have a number of Afro-Latinos that we need to give the space to, and that, like that listening and safe space, knowing that there will be a time for the, like the conversation to move, like how have you Latinos experienced racism?
Mm-hmm.
Where have you experienced discrimination? What parts would you like to, what are your own Jemimas, if you want,
Mm-hmm.
that we can address? And I think that we're leaning towards doing that towards Hispanic Heritage Month, which would be the natural time in September for us to have those conversations with brands. So any advice that you have for us to start getting ready for the moment in which we have the spotlight would be actually fantastic.
Yeah, well, I would say, again, pointing back to you, this is formal now. I am inviting you to come and moderate your own state of revolt for the Hispanic community. We'll put it together with you. And I think it's three things, right? The three things are, how are you feeling? How are you coping? Then how are you leading? And then what can others do to be supportive? I think it's that simple.
Yeah, and I think that that's right. And the timings, the incredible opportunity that I think that we have through the opening door, the pain that the African community is going through, the death of George Floyd, how that opened the door. For example, I agree with Jesus Torres, who's reminding us that we have a celebration, the DACA decision of the Supreme Court, where it's allowing dreamers. Si se puede, DACA must stand absolutely after the Supreme Court on the great news of the LGBTQ now, great news for dreamers and DACA that will not have to face mass deportations. I think that there's an opportunity for the country to, like now that the country is listening and the chief marketing officers and brands are listening, to have our narrative right. We know from the Edelman Trust Barometer on the racial issues that 60% of everyone in America wants to have a conversation about racial discrimination. So I think that it is a good time. And
Mhm.
Nadine, tell me about companies that you have seen stepping up rightly.
Oh my gosh. Well, there's so many. I mean, you mentioned a couple already, with Aunt Jemima and also Uncle Ben's, really addressing their brand image, if you will. Um, and, I think there's a lot of the external kind of repositioning, rethinking, pivoting, like, oh my gosh, did we actually pay attention to this? Did we acknowledge this? And now that we know, well, everybody always knew, but like now that we actually are forced to be truly aware, what are we going to do differently? So there's the external brand repositioning. I think every brand out there right now is going through a major exercise of self-reflection and looking at not just their external position, but their internal position. And there's a lot of work being done now, a lot of soul searching. I just hosted 2 CMO symposiums this week, one Tuesday and one yesterday. There were 50 CMOs that came together to talk about the great marketing reboot that needs to happen, which is it will never be the same. Everything's changed through COVID, through social unrest. Like the entire marketing function is being rethought, and the way we lead marketing is changing. And every single person agreed that the role of the marketer moving forward must absolutely take into account brand purpose, but also internal culture, working closer with HR, and really taking a stand with the community around topics that the community cares about. So it's much more community centric, which requires different listening tools, which requires different tactics, different strategies. So it's a really interesting time for brands and marketers right now.
And have you, I mean, like, I have no doubt that we will see changes in hiring, promotion within companies. Do you think that you can expect or see media spend changes, multicultural spend changes, like given this situation? Like, how have you started like seeing or advising CMOs to like, well, you have to actually like do take action also on your media spend?
Yes, 100%. Yes, in fact, you just saw a letter come out from the ANA AIM with lots of signatures on it, with multi points on what they commit to, and part of that is investing in multicultural marketing, not just from how to produce an ad, but everything from what does the consumers really care about, what do they really need, how do we authentically connect, how do we back that up in the marketing ecosystem in terms of the creators we hire, the agencies we work with, what does our own team look like, who's doing the hiring of the agencies. So it is a thread that goes all the way back into the inside of a company, and kind of like, I think you remember the circle we drew for our council,
Yeah.
which starts with the brand marketers up here, their internal organization, and then their partners on the agencies, then the creators, then the consumer, and then the employer brand. All of that comes full circle back. What's really important, and I think it's finally less important than it was, say, 3 months ago, was the need to always prove that DNI would have an ROI. Like we just know that, but actually pointing to the numbers has been hard for many. So they have a hard time justifying the investment. Like forget it. As marketers, we have to operate with our gut too. We know that DNI will drive much greater growth long term, and we can work on an absolute mathematical equation to do that. But just do it. And like Mark said, you need to double down now, because a lot of companies are taking a step back. They're not investing in DNI as much as they used to, and that's going to hurt everyone. We can't step back right now. We have to take 2 steps forward.
And I am looking forward for, I'm looking forward for that time. I hope that we can count with you and with your incredible platform, that you open up and you have the access code and you're giving it to some people, some communities like ours. And I am very grateful for that. Hispanic Heritage Month ideally would be an opportunity for us to shine a light on the Hispanic stars, on creativity, on the industry, through columns, through publications, through features, trying to see the Hispanic star in every window, in every T-shirt, in every talking point, celebrating that America is made of stars and Hispanics are one of them. And thanks to allies like you, Nadine Dietz, I have confidence that we can really make a difference and really catapult this opportunity to make radical change the way that we need it. Thank you so, so much for being with us. You have a group of fans with all of us seeing what you're trying to do. Thank you so very much.
Thank you for everything that you're doing. It's such incredible and important work. So thank you for inspiring us.
Absolutely. So looking forward to doing more, and I'm looking forward for that opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.